Hello, everyone. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. And today I am joined by Tomer. How's it going, Tomer?
Hey Seth, how's it going?
It is going well. I'm super excited. Today we get to talk about the new cards from Conspiracy Take the Crown in the context of Commander in specific. So we're not talking about reprints. That's been covered in a lot of other places and articles and stuff. So we're talking only new cards today, and we're gonna count down the 10 best or Tomer's 10 favorite cards for Commander from Conspiracy Take the Crown. Let's start off. We have one honorable mention, and this is more a theme, I think, than individual cards, but the voting theme that we have from Conspiracy. So, Illusion of Choice is one example, lets you control other people's votes. And then Ballot Broker is another example, which lets you vote an extra time. So, Tomer, what do you think about the voting theme in Conspiracy 2?
I love the voting theme. I love the political implications of it in multiplayer, and I think it's a very underrated theme too, especially in multiplayer games where people are like, "Well, you're not going to usually get the side that you want or the result that you want all the time." But realistically, in playtesting, or especially in our group, it seems that you can get away with manipulating the vote just politically by like making temporary alliances. You'll just say to somebody, "Look, we have a mutual threat, we have a mutual opponent. If you vote my way, I'll deal with it." And that makes the cards so much more powerful than you'd expect them to be. And we got a bunch of sweet vote cards in the first conspiracy set. Now we got a bunch more. We had Will of the Council in the first one, and now we got Council's Dilemma in the second one. And I counted, and we have 15 voting cards now between the two sets, and then an additional four cards that deal with manipulating the vote in some way. So we actually have the basis for a pretty sweet voting deck. You can use those cards. You can use other political cards from previous Commander pre-constructed decks, like the Offering set, Intellectual Offering, Volcanic Offering, a bunch of creatures like Skullwinder, where you're helping yourself while helping an opponent at the same time. So we have a really good basis to do a bunch of different political voting decks right now, and that's really exciting to me because I love that style of play.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I actually tweeted about when we started seeing new cards, and I'm really excited to make a voting deck. Not so much because I think the voting itself is awesome, which it is, but mostly because I think it would be really annoying for everyone else at the table to make a choice every time I play a card or do anything. So for some reason that appeals to me.
I could see you loving, especially Illusion of Choice, where you're like, you have to vote, but you have to vote my way.
Yeah, it's like the mind slaver of voting cards almost for only
Yeah.
one mana and it cantrips. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, let's move on to our top 10. So, number 10 on our list, we have our first Planeswalker. This one is Doretti, Ingenious Iconoclast. So, what do you think about this one, Tomer?
I think he's awesome. He's a 3 mana planeswalker, and you can use his -1 ability essentially 3 times in a row if you do have an artifact to sacrifice. So he can be repeatable removal, or he can just make artifacts for fodder for other artifact synergies, like Goblin Welder, for example, or the previous Doretti, if like this one dies for some reason and you play the second one. So he's open to a lot of artifact shenanigans. He wants to be in an artifact deck. The only weird thing about him, I would say, is he's in Rakdos colors, and black traditionally doesn't support artifacts outside of like Mirrodin blocks. So it's going to be a little bit difficult finding a correct home for Doretti, but there is one commander that I know of that actually likes playing artifacts in red black, and that's the Shattergang brothers. They can sacrifice an artifact to make each other player sacrifice an artifact, which works really well if Doretti's +1 ability. You just make a 1/1 artifact with his +1 ability, then you sacrifice it to the Shattergang brothers, and then everybody sacrifices an artifact. So there's a couple little neat synergies there. I think he'd be a little bit more powerful. He was just mono red, but he's still really sweet. And in the decks that can play him, he's going to be very powerful.
Another interesting option is Mishra, which is
Ooh,
Grixis, right? And I know it's a
yeah.
weird deck, but it does have a pretty heavy artifact theme, so I'm not exactly sure how it would fit in a Mishra deck, just because Mishra acts like nothing else when you really build around it, because the ability is so weird in a singleton format. But that's another artifact based deck that is in the colors. And with Dreddy, in the worst case, the thing I really like about it is one turn you plus one it, the next turn you negative one it, and basically you get to kill an artifact or creature every other turn. So it's kind of keeps it this neutral loyalty. With a lot of planeswalkers, the abilities don't line up. Like it's -2 or something, and then the plus is only 1, so you can't go through that cycle. But in the worst case, you can just use this as like a slow removal spell that randomly hits artifacts as well.
Yeah, definitely. And even I think you made a great point with Mishra too. I didn't even think of him, and I've played him recently. I think that would probably be the best slot for him, honestly, because Mishra is all about artifacts, and the ready's making fodder for it or acting as removal.
Moving on to number 9 on our list, we have another red card, this time a mono red card. This is Subterranean Tremors. This card is so sweet.
Oh yeah. Just from a flavor standpoint, this is amazing. You just have there's like this big Godzilla creature that's like burrowing under the ground, so it's doing like earthquake damage to people who are on the ground, and then it like breaks like glass and whatever, breaks the market, and then actually when you pay enough mana, he emerges and you have an 8/8 giant lizard creature, which is amazing. So big flavor win, I would say, and just as a card in general, there's so much versatility here. It's a board wipe, it's an artifact wipe, and it gives you a big creature, just depending on how much mana you have available to yourself. So I love the versatility here, and I think it doesn't fit in all decks because first of all, you don't want to have too many creatures out when you play this, or grounded creatures out when you play this, and you also don't want to have too many artifacts when you play it if you pay 4 or more. I would say the best deck for this would probably be Gruul decks, red green, because green usually has a bunch of sorceries that can ramp you instead of just using creatures or artifacts like Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Rampant Growth, Farseek, all of those. So you could ideally have a board without too many small creatures out and not a lot of artifacts out. And then you just wipe everybody else's artifacts, wipe everybody else's creatures, and hopefully get an 8/8 lizard out of the whole thing as well. So it could be really powerful in the right deck, I think.
All right, number 8 on our list, we have another Planeswalker. This one was the first card spoiled. Also recently revealed that the foils have alternate art, which is something they've never done before. So if you open a foil Kaia Ghost Assassin, it's going to be pretty sweet and really expensive. So what do you think about the black-white Planeswalker in the set, Tomer?
Oh, the foil is so cool. Yes, the card itself is actually really good. It immediately reminded me of one of my favorite black cards, Siphon Mind, where each player discards a card, and then you draw a card for each card discarded this way, and it's 4 mana. So Kaia's -2 ability is very similar to that, where everybody discards a card and then you draw 1 card. You don't draw as many cards, but the discard effect is the same, and she's repeatable. You can play her on first turn, -2 her, and then -2 her again, which is really powerful. And then her 0 ability is really flexible. You can either just use it to reset her loyalty counters, or you can deal with tokens permanently, or you can deal with just problematic creatures that you don't have a permanent solution to. And then her -1 is just, it's good. It's just some reach. It takes you out of the red zone if you're afraid of that. It's a good finisher. So she's very flexible and just really powerful. I think you're going to be using her mostly for her -2 ability, but the fact that her 0 and her -1 abilities are so versatile, I think she's a really strong pick for many types of decks, like Orzhov decks, just in general, stacks decks where you're just locking the board and she can actually grind people out. Super Friends.
The other thing is you can use the 0 ability to reuse enter the battlefield triggers, which for me is one of the most exciting parts. Like you can, I really like blink effects, and there's so many powerful enter the battlefield triggers that are played on creatures in Commander. The thing is, a lot of the blink cards aren't that great in Commander. You don't really want to necessarily put them in your deck because they're small or they're pretty limited. But Kaia is a blink effect that also has all these sweet commander abilities that you were talking about. So I think it's really cool in that sense too, that you can use it to, I don't know, blink out your Woodfall Primus or blink out your Terastodon or things like that, which just seems super powerful, and you're not having to play a Flicker Wisp or something that's pretty much only good for the blinking. It's just not a big enough threat in a format where you start with 40 life. So that's the thing I'm most excited about, is to build some sort of like blink deck around Kaia.
Wow, I didn't even think of that. That's a great point. So she's even more flexible than I gave her initial credit for. Yeah, and her blink effect doesn't even cost any loyalty, so you can do it nigh infinite amount of times.
All right, number 7 on our list. We are heading into a couple of green cards. First, we have Cevallos. Is that Cevallos?
I think it's Selvala, but
All right,
I mean,
Cevallos.
fantasy names.
Cevallos, Heart of the Wilds. So, Tomer, take it away.
She has some resemblance to the original Selvala, Explorer Return, where that she offers the table, and mostly you, card draw and ramp. But this time, she's focusing on just giant creatures, which will make a lot of Timmy players out there very, very happy. She rewards the table for playing the biggest creature. So if you're playing Selvala, you're probably playing the biggest creature anyway. So she's mostly just doing card draw for you, like an elemental bond type effect. And then her ramp is insane. As long as you have a creature that is power 3 or greater, she is basically a better mana dork than you would usually get for like 2 or 3 mana. And if you have like a 5 or 6 power creature, she's generating a ton of mana, and it's in any combination too, so she can also act as mana fixing. I think the combination of both these two things make her a great staple for just giant beater type decks like Mael the Anima and my favorite Xenagos God of Revels. I'm instantly including her there, and even a mono green deck, you can have her as your leader and just go for straight Timmy and use the card draw and ramp off her. So I really like her.
Yeah, the ramp ability is just really insane. It almost feels like a fixed Raphalos. Like, it's not quite to that power level, but it's pretty easy to play high-powered creatures if you're playing green. So I could definitely imagine on turn 4, turn 5, essentially doubling up your mana almost to 8, 9, 10 mana, and then you're playing something that's super huge, an Ulamog, a Woodfall Primus, and then the next time you have almost unlimited mana for a Genesis Wave or a Green Sun Zenith or something like that. So the mana ability is what really excites me.
Yeah, absolutely. And even without any board whatsoever, Selvala is still making you 2 mana. Well, she's putting you up a net 1 mana, but she's also mana fixing at the same time. So worst case scenario, she's just a really good mana dork, and then she just has so many plus sides if you actually start developing a board.
Number 6 on our list, we're staying with Cevallos. This is Cevallos Stampede. So this is our first Council's Dilemma card that we've talked about. So Tomer, what do you think about this one?
Oh boy, it's so flashy. It's so fun. Like, I'm not a huge green player, but I was just like, basically any big Timmy deck is going to love this card. Both versions of it is fantastic, especially if you have like a big hand of 7 and your opponents are just going to start sweating a bit to see which one they vote for. If they vote for, what was it, free, you got to put a permanent card, from your hand onto the battlefield. So it could be something giant, some like 7 mana creature, or it could be like mana reflection and just double all your mana for that 6 mana enchantment. And then if they vote wild, it's kind of random, unless it's not if you use like a scroll rack effect or a Sylvan Library or something to manipulate the top of your library. But you're getting creatures, and it's amazing, and it's 6 mana. It's crazy.
It reminds me, though, of Tooth and Nail in some ways. It's got a little bit more of a random element built into it, but it's kind of calls back to Tooth and Nail and to Eureka almost, but a one-sided Eureka. So it's definitely really powerful. Anything that can just let you put things from your hand onto the battlefield for free is pretty insane. And with the new voting system, with the old voting cards, only whatever one would actually happen, unless it was tied, and then there was exceptions for that. But with this, you get to do something for each vote. So in the worst case, if you really want to put something from your hand on the battlefield, your vote is going to let you get that show and tell effect, even if all your opponents vote for the other option and give you a bunch of random creatures. So you do have some control over it, which you didn't necessarily have with the old voting cards in a multiplayer format.
Yeah, it's even better than the old Will of the Council cards, because not only do you have some sort of control, but it also scales better, because in a typical multiplayer game, it's usually the free for all is usually like a 4-player game. But if you have like 5 or 6 players, which also happens, these Council's Dilemma cards gets even better because it's for each vote, right? So unlike the last one where it was just you get one effect and it can tie, it can tie, and then sometimes you get both effects. This one, it just every single vote increases the power level of the card.
All right, number 5 on our list, we're going to the opposite end of the spectrum. A little red creature, Grenzo Havoc Raiser.
He's a little red creature, but he has so much value. I love it. I was really excited about Grenzo when I read that he offers card advantage, and he does it in like a traditionally blue way where you're kind of stealing the top card of your opponent's library. You see this effect in cards like Daxos of Meletis, Nightveil Spectre, and like Augury Adept. And I like that it's being shifted to red, because I think the fact that you're randomly drawing a card off your opponent and you're pillaging their library is a very red feeling ability, and red needs more card advantage. So I'm very happy to see this ability just move over to red with Grenzo. And I was happy seeing Grenzo have this ability, but I'm even more happy when I read that it's whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player. So if you have just a bunch of creatures, you're going to be getting a lot of value whenever you swing. You get the pick of the litter on which cards you actually want to cast that you flip over. So there's a lot of card advantage in Grenzo, and the goat ability is also going to be situationally good too. He's going to be great in just decks that can spew out a lot of creatures. And the first deck that comes to mind is Krenko Mob Boss, because he just dumps a bunch of goblins onto the board, and then Grenzo could like effectively just mill out your opponents by hitting for like 50 a turn. So yeah, he's amazing.
I'm not surprised you like this card, Tomer, because it feels like a reverse red version of Edric is what this card reminds me of. The way, essentially, whenever a creature you control deals damage, you draw a card. It's just a random card off the top of your opponent's library instead of whatever you put in your deck.
Yeah, absolutely, and it highly pushes you towards building like a wide weenie deck, which is what Edric is.
Number 4 on our list, we have one of the face cards of the set. This is Queen Marchesa. So lots of stuff going on, and the introduction of the Monarch mechanic. So Tomer, take it away.
I mean, if you want to play a Monarch deck, she is the most obvious and best choice for it. Whenever she enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. So I think that's amazing. She has a lot of subtle power to her. She has a lot of stuff going on. She has Death Touch, she has haste. So obviously it's going to be annoying to block. Her haste ability will let her steal back her crown off an unsuspecting opponent pretty easily. Recasting her makes you the Monarch. So you can expect to be a consistent Monarch with her, especially if you start building around that ability. I've seen a bunch of different variants for Queen Marchesa so far. A lot of them focus on either building around a monarchy style deck, which would be really fun. You just go for political cards, you go for pillow fort, you make sure you're the monarch and stay the monarch by like wheeling and dealing with your opponents to take out mutual threats and backstabbing along the way, and running like just monarchy flavored cards like Royal Assassin in the deck. So I'm very excited to play that style of deck. And then there's also the more cutthroat version of her, where you can play her as stacks, where you just make sure nobody can play anything, no fun is allowed on the table, but you're slowly gaining card advantage off her Monarch ability. So it's actually a really nice, grindy Mardu style deck and you don't really get to see that too much in Mardu. So I like her versatility. I like the flavor of her, and I just like all the little interactions that she has going on. I really like it a lot.
Number 3 on our list, moving forward. Oh man, this card.
Blue card.
It is a blue card. I don't even know what to say about this one. It is. What do you think, Tomer?
It's broken. Expropriate. It's basically two cards that are super fun or super annoying, depending on how you view it in Commander. It's basically blatant thievery and time warp or time stretch put together in one card for just 9 mana. It's the crazy, flashy blue bomb that Wizards like to give us, like Enter the Infinite and Omniscience and stuff like that. This kind of follows the trend. So on average, it's going to be a double time warp and a kind of pseudo blatant thievery effect, or you're just going to take an extra turn for yourself and then steal a permanent from each opponent. And either choice is absolutely fine with me.
Doesn't it seem like you're just gonna win the game a lot if when you cast this? Like, assuming, I would imagine, I hate giving people extra turns, so I would imagine a lot of votings where you vote for an extra turn for yourself, then you steal a permanent from each opponent. It seems like during that extra turn, things are probably gonna go pretty well for you.
Yeah, I think there's never a bad time to play Expropriate. There's going to be better times where you can steal better permanents. But, I mean, taking an extra turn and blatant thievering the board is always going to be a winning combination. I would be very surprised if there's going to be many situations where you resolve Expropriate and don't win after your extra turns. Or at least put yourself in a position where winning is inevitable. This card is absurd. And the even better thing is, even if you cast it fairly, like you ramp up to 9 mana, you cast Expropriate, it's bonkers, it's amazing good. But there are many ways in Commander where you can cheat the casting cost, which is rather high. The two most popular methods are Narset Enlightened Master and Mizzix of the Magnus. Both of them have ways to either give a super heavy discount on the casting cost or just cast it for free. And in those decks, Expropriates is going to be a very quick way to win the game.
So, do you just slam this, assuming you're not some weird, like, aggro blue deck and you're playing ramp and normal stuff, is this just auto-include, you build a blue deck, this is automatically in the 99?
Yeah, you'd have to have a very aggressively costed deck to not want to run this. It's like decks that can run the overload cost of Cyclonic Rift, which is 7 mana, I think. The same decks are going to be willing to run Expropriate for 2 more.
Sweet.
So it's going to go in pretty much any deck that likes going with big mana, which is most of them, I would say. And then Narset Enlightened Master and Mizzix of the Magnus. It doesn't even matter if you have like an average casting cost of your deck of like sub 3. This is still going to be really close in those.
Yeah,
So.
I imagine casting this card a lot. It just does a lot of things that seem really fun. I love stealing my opponent's stuff, and I really enjoy taking extra turns, so it's got everything in it. If only it drew a card when it resolved or something, it would be the perfect commander card.
Oh man, I'm going to really enjoy playing this in my Narset deck, and I can expect that everybody on the internet is going to hate this card and wish that it was banned. But until then.
Speaking of getting banned, our number 2 card is the card that I have heard the most people say should be preemptively banned. Leopold, Emissary of Trest. Is this card really as busted as some people think?
I mean, if you play a fair deck, then Leopold is not going to be an issue. Just casting him doesn't mean you're going to win the game. There is a deck building that you have to do around him. But he is definitely one of the more powerful generals, much like Narset, I would say. The capability, the ceiling for him is very, very high. The fact that you're denying your opponents drawing more than 1 card each turn, that's all right. That's not busted in any way. And the fact that if you're permanent, you get to draw a card if your permanent is targeted by a spell or ability, that's also not busted. but it's what he can do immediately afterwards, after he resolves, that's really busted. And that's the windfall effect. Any card that says each player either discards their hand or shuffles it back into the library and then draws a new hand, Leopold is busted with those because he denies your opponents from drawing more than one card when it says redraw your hand. So
And
you get to windfall and you get to get your hand back, but your opponents only get one card back, and that's so busted. Wow.
and I think isn't there one Power 9 card that's legal in Commander?
Yes, it's Time Twister.
And that just happens to be the Power 9 card that is like turn 2, turn 3, all your opponents discard their hands, you get a new 7.
That is true.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to check.
So not only is Leopold, he has a very straightforward deck building theme. You run the windfall cards. You run any wheel effect essentially that is available in blue and black, which is a ton. You get to ramp him out the most efficiently because you're in green. So like a turn 2 Leopold is pretty simple, and then turn 3 windfall, everybody loses all their hand. It's gonna happen very often.
The
And yeah, what?
the scary thing for me about that is that's probably fine-ish in competitive Commander when everyone's playing Force of Wills and that type of interaction. But could you imagine, this is pretty budget. Like, windfall effects aren't that expensive. Leopold is in print. Like, this could easily show up in Commander Clash level decks where we don't have Force of Wills, and it seems like it's pretty dominating, or it could be if you're playing kind of a casual, like, budget-friendly version of Commander where you don't have the ways to interact and stop that combo.
Oh, absolutely. If the internet is any indication, feedback from him, a lot of people are trying to build him right now. And these are mostly casual players, too, where they're like, he looks kind of fun. I'm going to build a nice Leopold deck. Yes, I'm going to play a nice Leopold deck. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to go infinite combos. I'm just going to destroy everybody's hands. And so they build their nice Leopold deck, and they crush all their opponents, and they get hate. And then they're like, well, I'm getting hated out now, so I might as well go for some infinite combos. And now all of a sudden, they have like a $60 Leopold deck that is just crushing people and could probably go into like your local game store tournaments and smash folk for just $60. So
So this is a card that's going to turn nice, friendly, casual Commander players into these like hardcore, ruin everyone's game type of players.
pretty much. And that's like the only real justifiable reason for banning him. There's other he's not absurd as a commander. I mean, there are other busted commanders, but they all cost a lot more money to make them busted. Like Narset still needs time warp effects to be busted, and those end up being like $10 each. Leopold, though, Windfall is not an expensive card, and the iterations of it are not expensive. Mana Dorks are not expensive, so he's just a very efficient, cheap deck that is going to make a lot of people upset.
Well, I'm glad we had this talk, because when I first saw it, my initial reaction was, I think Edric is way more miserable than this to play against. But now that we've been talking about the wheel effects, I think I've changed my opinion. I'm very scared of Leopold now. Well, amazingly enough, Leopold is not number one on our list, somehow. Instead, we have a white card at number 1, Recruiter of the Guard, maybe the most hype card from the set, period, for Constructed and apparently Commander as well. So, Tomer, what does this do in Commander?
So I had to put it because it's a white tutor effect, and poor white does not have a lot of love in Commander. But then we get this, and it's amazing. This is, I would say, one of the very best tutors ever printed for white in Commander. I don't know about other formats, but definitely in Commander, this is the best it gets, and it's really great. It's essentially the white version of Imperial Recruiter. Imperial Recruiter does the same thing, except it focuses on the power level, the power of the creature, as opposed to Recruiter of the Guard, which focuses on the toughness. White likes focusing on toughness, red likes focusing on power. Flavor win, I'm happy with that. But the real joy about this is what exactly it can tutor up, and it could tutor up a lot of things. Just in white, you can get Karmic Guide, you can get Academy Rector, you can get Containment Priest, and just the list goes on. And then if you go multicolor, it gets even better. You get Oracle of Moldiah, Kiki Jiki, Blood Artist, Phyrexian Metamorph, just like all your combo pieces, all your utility pieces. They're all these cheap, small-bodied creatures the Recruiter of the Guard can get. He's also a creature, so you can blink him, you can bounce him, recast him, you can get him from the graveyard. So it's really good. It's really good stuff.
So here's my question, and we had this debate on the podcast about Constructed. Is this in Commander only a combo card? In Constructed, we kind of fell on the side that you wouldn't play this in Legacy just for value, because you can get some random creatures with it. Can you play this just for value if you're playing a white deck without any like instant win combo that you're searching up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just like searching up a Containment Priest because your opponent is running like a Graveyard Reanimation cheaty face type deck is totally legitimate. Or just if you're looking for more ramp, you're in like white, green, and you need some ramp slash card draw, you can just get an Oracle of Moldiah, a bunch of little things. Or if you need a clone, you get Phyrexian Metamorph. Those things aren't combos by themselves, but they're also amazing plays. Especially if you have bounce or blink effects, and Recruiter of the Guard just becomes an engine. But at the very least, he's a 3-mana tutor for a bunch of really good cards. And I mean, white does not have that many tutors. They have Thalia's Lancers, which gets legendary, and Ranger of Eos, which gets 2 one converted mana cost creatures. Those are the only 2 that I can think of that are pretty decent. So I'd play Recruiter of the Guard just for value.
And this actually can find Ranger of Eos, because it has 2 toughness. You can also search up Flicker Wisp, which can blink the Recruiter to immediately get another creature with a Recruiter. You can Sun Titan it back because it's 3 mana. And of course, Kaia. This is a pretty sweet one to just blink with the 0 ability on Kaia every turn and search out another creature every time you go through that loop. So
yeah, so it becomes an engine very easily. And then, of course, any combo deck that runs white probably is going to be running this as an auto-include. They probably already took out a card in anticipation for this coming out.
I also think there's some white or white-black cards that get creatures back from the graveyard if they have, like, power or maybe toughness of 1. So that's kind of another interesting possibility. It seems like you could build a really grindy deck where over the course of several turns, you're going to just tutor up a whole new handful of creatures with the Recruiter of the Guard. So lots of possibilities.
Yeah, there's a lot of basically any white deck I'm going to be building moving forward is probably going to have Recruiter of the Guard. It's that good.
So that has been our Conspiracy 2 Take the Crown countdown for Commander. So Tomer, on the way out the door, any final thoughts about the new set?
It's a small set, but it has a ton of value, a lot of good political cards. I don't want to harp on too long about the reprints, but the reprints are great. You just get, like, Burgeoning, you get Horn of Greed, you get a bunch of other... Ooh, you get Berserk, you get Show and Tell, Beast Within, new Phyrexian art. It's really good.
And it's pretty awesome because you're right with the reprints. They reprinted not only a lot of really expensive cards, but cards that are actually pretty sweet in multiplayer formats. So it's exciting to see those cards potentially gaining a wider audience. And one of the funniest things with this set is a lot of people don't even know about those cards. Like when the spoilers were going up on Goldfish and on the Facebook page, there was a lot of comments like, oh, Burgeoning is going to be so good in Commander. That card's going to wreck Commander and things like that. Because this whole new generation of Commander players doesn't even know Horn of Greed and Burgeoning and some of those cards exist. So it's really cool that new players are discovering these cards because of Conspiracy, and they're actually going to be cheap enough that they can play with them without spending a ton of money to build a fun, casual Commander deck.
Yeah, I totally expect to see a lot more Burgeonings, a lot more Berserks just showing up in decks. Not because they weren't good before, just because people didn't know about them, as you said, and they were also just priced out of it before.
Well, that has been our top 10 Conspiracy 2 cards for Commander. Tomer, thanks so much for hanging out. It's always fun to have these conversations.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back in, what, 3, 4 weeks, a month to talk about Kaladesh cards and Commander. So we will both talk to you then. In the meantime, keep up on Commander Clash. New episodes coming out every Saturday. Anyway, thanks, Tomer. Thanks, everyone. And we will talk to you soon.